What do you think is the difference between joy and happiness? The theologian Henry Nouwen said that joy is the experience of knowing that you are unconditionally loved and that nothing, sickness, failure, emotional distress, oppression, war, or even death, can take that love away. The theme of the day for the third week of Advent is always joy. It represents the joy found in today's readings. And it can be hard to talk about joy sometimes when we see these things like Henry Nouwen talked about. Sickness or emotional distress, and especially war right now. So this sermon isn't to diminish the hardships that we do experience, but perhaps to let you feel joy even though these things are happening. It's to help you focus on God's love and helping us feel joy when things feel overwhelming or difficult. And no matter how many pressures or difficult things are on our minds, it's to remind us that there's a larger truth in the world, one of joy and love for all people. Ultimately, God's love claims our lives. And sometimes the most comforting thing we can hear is that when we go through struggles, when we're having a hard time, God knows what it is like to do that. So I thank God for the small moments of joy we experience, even in the midst of struggles. You may have heard of a professor, a very famous social worker named Brené Brown. She studies things like courage and shame and vulnerability and empathy. She says that joy is the most vulnerable emotion we experience. And that just doesn't seem right to me, that joy would be so vulnerable, because I would think it would be some kind of sadness or fear. But she says, no, joy is the most vulnerable thing that we can experience of all the emotions. And in her research, she's interviewed so many people, and she found that people are often quick to think the worst in a situation. They fear being hurt or experiencing loss or pain. And we can understand why people do this, because there is a lot of hurt and loss in the world. Anytime we put ourselves out there to do something new, we could get hurt. We don't know what might happen. Even when we love another person, we can get hurt. Even when we do good things. When we're experiencing joy, sometimes our internal thinking can catastrophize a situation. And Brené gives the example of a parent checking in on their child while they are sleeping. And this example has just been so powerful to me, even though I don't have my own children. But a parent checks in on their child while they're sleeping, and instead of being overcome with joy, especially for the sleeping, quiet child, the parent looks and starts to think about all the things that could go wrong. I don't know if any of you have done this. I'm sure not. But you can imagine it. First-time parents worried, are we doing everything right? Did they let us take this baby home from the hospital? Parents thinking about the rest of their child's life, their future. They know their life might be hard. They might think of some specifics that could go wrong. And this fear keeps a parent from experiencing joy. Joy is hard to feel and not to try to protect ourselves from. How many of you become nervous when you're driving a car or sometimes in a train or an airplane? You think about some of the things that might go wrong instead of appreciating the mechanical miracle that you're currently riding in. Sometimes when I'm flying, I have some of the best views in the world. The most beautiful landscapes. I'm seeing things I've never seen before. I'm in the clouds. How wonderful. But still, in the back of my mind, there's that thought about the fact that I'm flying way above the earth, and that just doesn't feel right. And I go to that place where I think, oh, what if something bad happens? But I know that a plane is safer than a car even. But I still think, oh, what could happen down here in Lake Erie as we descend? I still can't help it. So I decided the next time I fly, I'll try to appreciate the miracle of flying. I will try to appreciate everything that I see. But Brené Brown says that we try to just rehearse tragedy so we can get ahead of it. Beat it to the punch, she says. That way we don't become vulnerable. Joy is hard. To experience joy, we need to practice gratitude, and that's hard too. It's not just changing your attitude or trying to be more positive, but it's a practice. We have to try to choose gratitude when fear could easily lead. We have to go through the day sometimes looking for it, because if we're not intentional, things sort of just pile up. Bad news piles up. The dishes pile up. Things are overwhelming. And that all just puts a damper on our joy. Isaiah says, I will greatly rejoice in the Lord. My whole being shall exalt in my God. And I think that's a good goal to strive toward. Our whole beings giving and experiencing joy for God and for everything. Even in Isaiah, God's people were continuing to face struggles, although they were no longer in exile. And the Spirit of God prompted something amazing. It's known as this year of Jubilee. And so Isaiah talks about bringing good news to the oppressed, binding up the brokenhearted, proclaiming liberty to the captives, release of the prisoners. That's a lot. And why would God do this? Because God believes in justice. God believes in second chances. God believes in bringing joy and bringing abundance to all people. Because it was meant to be the year of the Lord's favor. And so what God's people learned in the temple was meant to carry out and into their lives. Into when they came across someone that owed them money. That God's favor, that God's joy could help them erase that debt. You may be thinking that this year is anything but the year of the Lord's favor. But I think this could be a concept that can be in our hearts no matter what we're going through. I want us to name what brings us joy in this place. But I hope that you can name what brings you joy in your lives. I hope that you can tell others, you bring me joy. And sometimes it's in presence. Sometimes it's in the thoughtfulness of a card. Sometimes it's in someone reaching out that we haven't heard from. spreading that Christmas cheer. I don't want one person to miss out on the joy found in this world. But I think in this theme, in this week about joy, it says a lot about God, because I believe God is joyful. I believe God is full of gratitude. And I believe God is rejoicing and singing for all of us. And I think God experiences joy in forgiving us. I don't know if you've ever thought about that, but I believe that God experiences joy in forgiving us, in giving us grace. John the Baptist was brave to announce that God was coming into the world. They didn't understand it. And John came to testify to the light. And he said he himself was not the light, but he came to testify to the light. And so my prayer for you on this third week of Advent, when Christmas is a week away, and maybe you're rushing to get more presents, or you're doing too much because it's Christmas, or you're not doing so well because it's Christmas. My prayer is that you could experience God's joy. And if you're up to it, that you could share it. We testify to God's light in our world every time we reach out to someone and let them know that we care. We testify to the light when we fight for justice for all humankind. And even in the toughest of times, we look for joy. We rejoice because we know that God is here with us. We know of God's great love for us in Jesus. And sometimes we wait for it. But we know it is here with us, and we know that there is nothing that can take it away. Thanks be to God.